Good morning. I am honored and pleased to be part of this very important event under the patronage of His Excellency Abdullah bin Tuq Al-Marri, the Minister of Economy and Cabinet Member. Thank you for your patronage and thank you for your support. I also want to express my gratitude for being invited by our organizer, His Excellency Abdul Qadir Ubaid Al-Ali, the chairman of the UAE IAA board. And it's so good to be among my colleagues in the profession, accountancy profession and auditing profession. I am honored to belong to this most honorable community. I take pride always claiming that in my former life and until now, I am an accountant. So it's good to be with you and a pleasure and honor to be part of your community. Thank you for inviting me, and I hope you will not regret it after you will hear what I have to say, because I want to be very candid and transparent. I want to warn you that my presentation is one of self-criticism. When I criticize the profession, accountancy profession, I am also criticizing myself. I started as an accountant in 1960. And I had my first practice license in accounting in Kuwait in 1965 as an auditor and as a member of the Association of Kuwaiti Accountants. And I was proud to be presented with their shield of recognition, which I cherish very much. Since then, I have been very interested in not only the actual performance of the profession, but in its future. And my talk today is about the future. Unfortunately, we have problems in our profession. And I remember when I was elected, the first Arab to be elected to the board of the International Federation of Accountants, and that was in '92. One of the members, it was a board of something like 15 members representing the major accounting firms, and there were 8 at that time. They were called the Big 8. Now they are the Big 4. One member criticized me because on my profile, I mentioned that I am a businessman. And he said, this is not acceptable. We are not businessmen, we are accountants. Ours is not a business, it's a profession. And I tried to explain that any profession is a business. And I was asked to change my title to become public accountant instead of businessman. And that took a debate at the board. And I'm sure they were looking down upon me, this man coming from the developing world, trying to tell us what accountancy is, and insisting on changing our image as a very special group of people. Accountants used to look at themselves, not so much now, but in the past, they used to look at themselves as a special breed of human beings. They are not like everybody. They are professionals. And this led to a problem of conservatism. Accountants, by definition, are very conservative. They are very difficult to change, and they believe that what is in the book is in the book, and it has to remain as such. Anyway, I refused to change my title, but aid came to me eventually in 1996 when the WTO was established. And after many decades of negotiations, and it talked about trade. And they defined accounting as a trade in accounting services. So I produced the agreement, which was binding on every country in the world who is member of the World Trade Organization, that we are traders. We are in business, because if you conduct a transaction providing service or sale and earning money as a result, you are trading. So are the other professions too. The medical profession is defined in the World Trade Agreement as trade in medical services. So everything we do as productivity is a trade. And that's not insulting. And as I tried to explain at that time, if business is something downgrading, we shouldn't be dealing with our clients who are in business. How do we deal with something which is beyond us and below us, and continue to keep our respect for ourselves? Being in business is an honorable thing, and being a businessman is an honorable thing. Now that was the shocking start for me, as I refused, but in spite of that, they didn't like it. And when the ruling came by WTO, I was vindicated. Now, I have had many such problems in my career and my relationship with the international community of accountants. I remember that when we were in our first meeting, the chairman of the meeting said, and that was when I was on the board of the International Federation of Accountants, as I said, in '92, he said, we have here, our business is about accounting standards, one, which means how to keep the books, what rules and should be applied in record keeping and producing the financial results, and in auditing standards, which meant how to audit and check what the work of the accountant resulted in. And he said and accounting standards and auditing guidelines. I asked, why are we talking about standards in accounting, in bookkeeping, and guidelines in reference to auditing? shouldn't we talk about standards of auditing as just like we talk about standards in accounting? Everybody was unhappy, to say the least, that I made this provocative statement, as they thought, because, and I said, why? They said, because it is so in the Constitution. In our Constitution and in our rules, we have auditing guidelines and accounting standards. I said, does that mean that auditing guidelines are less imperative and less mandatory than the standards, because a standard is a higher thing than a guideline? The chairman was fed up with me, and he said, any seconding for this discussion? And it was no. So, end of discussion. I didn't give up. I managed to lobby for the next meeting to get one person to agree that we should discuss this subject. To make a long story short, it took me 1 year to change this. And now we're talking about auditing standards and accounting standards. Another problem I had was with what is the object or purpose of accounting. As I studied it at the American University in Beirut and in the international practicing firms, accounting is about record keeping in order to be able to produce at the end of the year the results of operation and the position, the financial position. And I said, what for? And they all looked at me with open eyes. What do you mean by what for? You don't think that arriving at the results and also producing a status of the financial position is important? I said, of course it is, but it must be for a purpose. And that purpose is decision making. I think we should change this definition of accounting to become that accounting is a tool for economic decision making. Again, it went through a battle, but finally that was introduced and added to the introduction of the accounting standards, that the objective of accounting is to be a tool for economic decision, because I need to know my position and my results in order to see how I can improve my results of operation and my financial position. I'm telling that this was a battle. These were battles that I fought, and fortunately I won. But that doesn't apply to everything, because I have failed many times in convincing the accounting profession and the leading accounting firms who take control of the profession. And when I say this, maybe I should have started by submitting my credentials, how I and why I was involved in all of this all throughout my life, and having been able so far to build one of the global accounting firms. In 1995, I was the chair of the UN Conference on Developing Accounting Education. I was asked by the UN in New York to review accounting education. And it was a multi-meeting with all societies of accountants in the world. And I was very pleased to hear the American chief head of the delegation say, education, our education has to change. It does not serve the needs of the time. And I said, you mean as chair? I said, you mean to be developed? He said, no, it has to be changed. It's no good. That was a very encouraging statement, and I thought that this should mean that there is potential for change. In '95 also, the UN Secretary General appointed me as chair of UN Working Group of Experts on International Standards of Accounting and Reporting, which is called United Nations ISAR, International Standards on Accounting and Reporting. And that paper or that report was adopted. We finished it in 1 year. And among the other positions, I'm only talking about positions at the UN now. I have also been elected in 1988 to 90 to the board of the IFRS, which at that time was called IASC, International Accounting Standards Committee. Now it is called the International Financial Reporting and Standards Committee. And I also served on the board of, as I said, the Federation of Accountants, and I also chaired the UN Group on Standards of Accounting and Reporting in 1995. In 1999, I was appointed to chair a task force on environmental accounting. And there I failed. Because after we developed a whole set of standards to bring accounting firms to accountability and to bring companies, operating companies, to accountability by asking the auditors and the accountants to make sure that the disruption by any company to the environment should be reflected in the results so that they should be accountable for it. When we finished that report, it was dismissed by the powers that control what was called, what at the meeting, in fact, that was a historic meeting because once we finished the meeting, I was told that the US ambassador and the British ambassador wanted to join the meeting. It was the final meeting to announce the product. And again, to make a long story short, they both said that this is a waste of time. We will not allow such a standard. You cannot have a standard on accountability, and we will have to, in all cases, we would like to tell you that your decision is meaningless unless it is adopted by the capital, the stock and the financial markets capital, which of course meant Washington. So that was shelved. Another failure I have met with was when I tried to implement a certain level of accountability in introducing a certain level of knowledge and fluency in ICT. I said that we are, because in another capacity, I was the chairman of UN ICT task force for designing the future of information technology and telecommunication at the UN. And I said, it is time that accountants also look at ICT in their accounting and in their auditing practice. It took a lot of time, and finally all I could get is a committee to study management accounting based on information technology. Now, why I'm saying all of this, I'm saying because the profession is very slow to develop and react to change. And that is something that I worry about. We are now in an era we are starting the knowledge revolution. We are at the start of the knowledge revolution, and there is a lot of things that need to change. But first, let me focus on the three tracks that relate to this subject. One is accounting and accounting standards, auditing and auditing standards, internal audit, no standards. And this is the theme of my presentation. I think we lack the formulation of rules, internationally accepted standards on internal audit. And I want to go one step before the process of internal audit, which is very important. I believe that we certainly need a standard-setting body globally, and let it be established by the International Federation of Accountants and the International Financial and Reporting Standards Committee to have a task force to develop standards on internal auditing. There is a wonderful association of internal auditors, but it's a membership group. It does not have a mandatory or forceful authority in developing and imposing standards on internal audit, which we need. But what we need more is standards on internal control. And my emphasis here is it's great to audit whether internal or external and discover discrepancies, but it would be much better if you can avoid discrepancies. When I talk about internal control, I talk about preventive or preemptive requirements so that when you come to audit or to internally audit, external audit, internal audit, you will find less violations and less discrepancies and less abuse. It's the idea of whether treatment is the only solution or whether treatment is a good solution, but preventive medicine is also a good solution. Internal control, which we refer to sometimes as checks and balances, is how the authorities and the responsibilities within the organization are structured. A very simple example, he who prepares the check or is the treasurer cannot be the person who authorizes the payment. In other words, division of responsibilities and what we call internal control requirements are as important, if not more important, than doing a lot of auditing and a lot of external and internal auditing and continuing to find the violations. I don't think that a businessman or an investor or whatever is more concerned about finding what is wrong than making sure that there is no wrong. It is better to stop a crime, to make it difficult for a crime to happen in life, than to make it easy and discover the criminal and punish him. So I am giving very primitive parallel in saying that internal control should be a basic requirement in the process of accounting. Therefore, I am calling on the establishment of an internal control international committee that would develop rules and standards for how to maintain the highest possible internal control system, which provides the highest control against violations. This is something that is badly needed. And I think that the profession should do that. And I call on 3 parties that can possibly be involved in this. The major accounting firms, auditing firms, all 4 of them could develop a task force and make recommendations on establishing such an authority. Another alternative is for the associations of accountants, namely the major standard setting bodies in the world, like IFAC, of course, and IFSR, and these already existing standard setting bodies can work out, establish a task force and work out such a solution. Thirdly, like what happened at the UN, for the UN Secretary General to mandate a committee on developing internal control standards. And I intend to write to all these 3 and see who would volunteer and help with that. I think any organization, any businessman would love to see better control and less violations of all kinds than discovering the violations. This is something that is badly needing. In our own organization, I have already formed a task force in Talal Ghazaleh International that would develop standards and rules for internal control, which we would comply with in our audit of our clients. So instead of looking at the items and discuss and verifying them, we will look at the internal control system and report on it as well. So we will develop internally, for our use, a set of internal control standards, and in our audit of our clients, we will review the adequacy of the internal controls in order to advise our clients on better internal control for better safety. I already suggested that the world is going into a knowledge revolution where everything is going to be ICT based and artificial intelligence enabled. If we try to be sincere and honest with ourselves, our profession is not up to date on this. Most of us find that our clients are ahead of us in adopting and implementing ICT technologies. in the preparation of the accounts and in their production of the financial statements. I think the profession needs to realize that this disruptive technology is disruptive our services unless we are able to adapt to the great progress that is happening in the field of accounting. And I'm sorry and sad to say that unless we do something, there will be no accounting profession. And it's as bad as that. Because why? Why do I need an accountant who knows the rules of accounting to check in an environment of ICT where I can have an audit program that includes all the required standards and just plug it into the accounting system of the client, and the program will do the audit much better than somebody who is checking the papers and the documents. In future, if we don't change, a new profession will take over from us, and this is the profession of tech audit programs. And I have announced a few months ago that we have started at Talal Abu Ghazaleh International developing what we call tag tech audit. The concept is that everything we can do manually, we can do now ICT enabled. So if we can, the role of the auditor in future will be to develop the best program that can do the audit, and the auditor, all he has to do is to take the results of this program, which can include every audit procedure we want, and will do the job for the auditor while he is in his office on the client's books and records, which are all digital. And our added value would be in analyzing and helping making the results useful for economic decision making. Back to my first statement that the object of accounting should be to help in economic decision making. Now, if we don't do that, and if we don't develop our audit practice methodology, which is now absolutely out of date, if we don't develop that, a group of technicians will take over the auditing profession. Because the standards are there, the audit program is there. All we need to do is to compete, and the competition between accounting firms in future will be on who produces the better or creates the better tech auditor. And I mean that this machine, this program, this tool will become the auditor instead of me. My job is to create it in a way that can function as good as it's possible. And the competition will be in who is a better auditor physically as a person, but who has the better program that can do the job digitally and in full compliance with all the standards in the world that you can input in this program. Another problem we have to address, and again, going to my start, I was in 1990, I have at least 15, I chaired and led at least 15 task forces at the UN and in the accounting profession internationally. And I said in the beginning that we needed to have a view of changing education. And what I'm talking about is changing education. Like in 1995, when I chaired the international conference at the United Nations in New York for change in education. Now I'm calling for this change in education to be digitally based for digital performance in a knowledge environment. That was and still is the need, and education is a continuous process, continuous change process, and we shouldn't be upset if we need to constantly change our approach. Last point. It is unacceptable that until this date, the great founding fathers of the profession do not recognize the qualifications of each other. And again, I was commissioned by the UN to chair a committee on the harmonization of professional qualifications. And we worked for many years. And the product was failure. It is absurd that the CPA, the AICPA, the Association of Certified Accountants, and the ICC, the British Association of Accountants, do not recognize each other's qualifications. In this world of interacted relations and interaction of business interest, and in what we used to enjoy and call globalization, when everything is being globalized, we need to have the accounting profession globalized, not just by standards, but by rules of operation. And one of these rules of international operations. I cannot understand why a chartered accountant in the UK, a great profession, or in Canada, or any of the great Australia, or any of the great accounting associations of the world, cannot practice in the US and vice versa. The fact that we need to have harmonization and recognition of accounting qualifications is badly needed. And I tried to address it I tried to address it in many on many occasions in many of my assignments at the international accounting world or at the United Nations. The problem is how to. And I made a proposal which I think needs still to be addressed and studied. I said, let us take the highest standards in every one of these major accounting qualifications requirements and use it as a benchmark. This means that we will take whatever is higher among all the qualifications as a requirement and make it as the standards. Even that approach was not acceptable to the professional bodies. That goes back again to my beginning, where we are so conservative that we don't think that there is anybody like us. Not only among our business community and our neighborhood, but also between us as members of the same profession. Every member of a profession or professional society thinks he is the best and his society is the best, and everybody else comes as second rate. We need a lot of standardization. We need a lot of change in education. And if we want, and as I said at the UN, if we need to have what the committee I chaired was called Harmonization of Professional Qualifications Task Force. If we needed that, we need to be sure that we start with education, because there should be a standard on accounting education, on auditing education. Okay, and therefore, this process of harmonization has to start with agreeing on basic education requirements as a standard, basic experience and continuous education requirements, in addition to all what any of the societies makes it a requirement for a practitioner to continue to practice. I am not very optimistic, but I also don't give up easily. I keep trying. Sometimes I succeed. And when I don't succeed, I blame only myself, because I would say to myself, I've made my presentation wrongly. I should have done it differently, and I will keep doing it differently, because there is always a better way to making your point. In closing, I think this conference can do a great contribution to humanity and to business. If you set up a team that would look into all the problems that we have, especially, and I say out of love, especially that many of our great accounting firms in the world are under scrutiny for serious violations. In order to keep the great reputation of accountancy profession, we need to look at our problems and in respect review whatever criticism is being made against us by authorities, governmental, and by the business community. I think a task force of eminent accountants or accounting firms from the globe, led by the US Associations of Accountants, the AICPA, or by Britain's Chartered Institute of Accountants, or by both of them, or by a group to review the status of the accounting profession, where it is and where it is going and where it should be going, and how and what we need to do in order to protect our profession and protect our reputation and respect in the world. Thank you very much.